The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Oakland sidewalk as a little girl knelt on the concrete, her small hands covered in colorful chalk dust. Her tongue stuck out slightly in concentration as she drew what looked like a family of butterflies, their wings spreading across the gray canvas in vibrant blues and pinks. The corner store behind her had been in her family for 2 generations. The faded Williams Family Market sign creaked gently in the autumn breeze, while the sweet smell of her mom's fresh-baked cookies drifted through the propped-open door. Every day after school, she would sit here and draw, waiting for her mom to finish the afternoon inventory. The neighborhood was changing. New apartment buildings were sprouting up like steel and glass mushrooms, bringing unfamiliar faces who sometimes looked at the old corner store with uncertainty. But most neighbors knew the little girl. Mrs. Chen from the dry cleaners would wave as she walked past. Mr. Rodriguez from the auto shop always complimented her artwork. That day started like any other. She had just finished drawing the 3rd butterfly when a police car rolled slowly down the street. She didn't pay much attention at first. Police cars often patrolled the area, but this one stopped. The crunch of boots on pavement made her look up from her chalk masterpiece. The officer stood over her, his shadow eclipsing her butterflies. His hand rested on his belt as he spoke into his radio, responding to that suspicious person call on Oak Street. His voice was clipped, professional, but there was something else in his tone that made the girl's stomach tighten. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, looking down at her with hard eyes. "I'm drawing," she answered, her small voice wavering slightly. She pointed to the store door. "My mom owns the—" "Stand up," he interrupted, his hand moving to his handcuffs. "Put your hands where I can see them." Confusion and fear mixed in her chest as she scrambled to her feet, chalk pieces scattering across her unfinished drawing. Her heart hammered against her ribs as cold metal clicked around her wrists. Tears spilled down her cheeks as neighbors began to gather, their voices rising in protest. "She's just a child," someone shouted. "That's the owner's daughter," called another. But the officer seemed locked in his own reality, reciting rights to a 9-year-old who only wanted to draw butterflies. He guided her toward the patrol car as more phones came out, recording the scene. The girl could barely see through her tears as her beloved sidewalk art disappeared from view. Inside the store, her mother was checking inventory, humming softly to herself, unaware that just outside, her daughter's innocent afternoon had transformed into a moment that would soon spark a movement. The cookies in the display case were still warm, their sweet scent a stark contrast to the bitter scene unfolding on the sidewalk. The gathering crowd's murmurs grew louder, their phones held high, capturing every second. The little girl sat in the back of the police car, her small shoulders shaking with sobs, her chalk-stained hands still bound behind her back. Her butterflies lay unfinished on the sidewalk, their wings smudged by hurried boots, a poignant symbol of innocence interrupted. This moment would soon explode across social media, igniting conversations about police conduct, racial bias, and the protection of childhood innocence. But right then, it was simply about a frightened little girl who couldn't understand why drawing butterflies on a sidewalk had led to such terrifying consequences. Inside the store, stacking fresh cookies on the display shelf, the mother had no idea her world was about to change. The bell above the door chimed frantically as Mrs. Chen burst in, breathless and wide-eyed. "Come quick. They've got your baby in a police car." The cookie tray clattered to the floor. Racing outside, the mother's heart stopped at the sight of her little girl's tear-streaked face through the patrol car window. Her white doctor's coat billowed behind her as she ran, the stethoscope around her neck swinging wildly. Just hours ago, she'd finished her morning shift at the children's hospital before coming to help at the family store. "What's going on here?" Her voice carried the authority of both a mother and a medical professional. The crowd parted as she approached, phones still recording. The officer turned, clearly surprised by her appearance, her professional attire a stark contrast to what he might have expected. "Ma'am, we received a call about a suspicious person." "A suspicious person?" She cut him off. her voice trembling with controlled anger. My daughter has sat on this sidewalk drawing with chalk every afternoon for the past 3 years. This is our store. Look at the sign. She pointed to the family name above the door, the same name embroidered on her white coat. The growing crowd of neighbors added their voices. Old Mr. Peterson, who'd lived on the block for 40 years, stepped forward with his cane. That little girl brings joy to this street with her drawings. We all know her. Who made this call? In the distance, more police sirens wailed. The first news van pulled up, attracted by the social media buzz already building. The mother's phone buzzed continuously in her pocket, friends and colleagues sending her the viral videos of her daughter's arrest. But her focus remained laser-sharp on getting her child out of that car. She pulled out her hospital ID, her business license, even old photos from her phone showing her daughter's daily chalk art sessions. Her hands shook, but her voice remained steady, years of handling emergency room crises kicking in. I want those handcuffs off my daughter. Now. Each word carried the weight of a mother's fury and a professional's command. The crowd had swollen to fill the sidewalk and spill into the street. Faces peered from apartment windows above. The regular customers who'd watched the little girl grow up stood firm behind the mother, a wall of community support. Someone had gathered the scattered chalk pieces, holding them like precious evidence. A police supervisor arrived, quickly assessing the situation. The mother's credentials, the crowd's testimony, the obvious youth of the suspect. It painted a clear picture of an incident gone horribly wrong. Within minutes, he was apologizing, ordering the handcuffs removed. When the car door finally opened, the little girl flew into her mother's arms. The crowd cheered, but the mother barely heard them. She was focused on her daughter's wrists, her doctor's eyes checking for marks, her mother's heart breaking at the fear still visible in her child's face. Back in the store, as she held her trembling daughter on her lap, the mother's phone kept buzzing. Civil rights organizations, news stations, other parents sharing similar stories. The incident was spreading across social media like wildfire, touching a nerve in communities across the country. Looking down at her daughter's chalk-stained hands, now clutching a cup of warm milk, the mother made a silent promise. This wouldn't end here. Not with just an apology. Her daughter's butterflies might have been smudged away, but from their ruins, something bigger would emerge. She didn't know yet about the changes she would help create, the reforms she would inspire. At that moment, she just knew that no child should ever feel criminalized for adding color to the world. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows through the store windows, mother and daughter sat together, planning tomorrow's chalk drawing. An act of resilience, a refusal to let fear win. The morning after the incident, the police chief sat at his desk, rubbing his temples as he watched the body camera footage for the third time. The young officer's approach, his tone, his quick escalation to handcuffs. Everything was wrong. On his computer screen, social media counters kept climbing. The video had reached millions overnight. Down the hall, internal affairs investigators were digging through files. They pulled record after record, building a pattern that made their faces grow darker with each page. The officer had similar incidents before, all involving minorities, all involving questionable calls, all showing the same rush to judgment. The mother arrived at the station that afternoon, not as an angry parent, but as a concerned citizen in her professional capacity. She brought with her a thick folder of research papers about childhood trauma and police interactions. Her white coat was replaced by a neat business suit, her manner calm but determined. "I'm not here for revenge," she told the chief, placing her studies on his desk. "I'm here because this needs to change. Not just for my daughter, but for every child in our city." The chief leaned forward, genuinely interested. He'd been up all night, thinking about his own grandchildren, imagining them in handcuffs for drawing with chalk. The mother's medical expertise opened his eyes to aspects he'd never considered. The lasting psychological impact of police encounters on young minds, the ripple effects through communities. Meanwhile, in a quiet room nearby, Investigators interviewed the person who had made the suspicious person call. The new neighbor shifted uncomfortably in his chair as they played back his words. "There's someone drawing on the sidewalk. They don't look like they belong here." His face reddened as he admitted he never bothered to visit the corner store, never knew it was family-owned. The investigation expanded beyond just that day. They found a disturbing trend in the neighborhood. A spike in suspicious person calls that coincided with the area's changing demographics. Old business owners being questioned in their own shops. Kids getting stopped on their own streets. Body camera footage from the incident revealed more than just the arrest. It caught the little girl's voice, small but clear, trying to explain about her mom, about the store. It captured the chalk dust on her hands, the half-finished butterfly wings. Most importantly, it showed how quickly an adult's assumptions could crush a child's innocent moment. The mother's phone kept ringing with support from unexpected places. Other police departments called, wanting to learn from this incident. Child psychologists offered to help develop new training programs. Even some of the new neighbors reached out, ashamed of their own biases, wanting to be part of the solution. Local news crews interviewed longtime residents outside the store. "We've watched that little girl grow up," said the old barber from next door. "Every day she makes this street more beautiful with her art. How do we explain to her that some people saw that as suspicious?" Inside the station, the investigation room walls were covered with evidence. Written reports, surveillance footage, witness statements, all telling the same story of how bias could blind people to the simple truth of a child at play. The mother's research added another layer, showing how these incidents created lasting trauma not just for the children involved, but for entire communities. As evening approached, the chief made a decision. This wouldn't be handled with the usual quiet reprimand and short suspension. Real change required more. He looked at the mother's studies again, then at the growing stack of similar incidents on his desk. The chalk drawings that had decorated the sidewalk might have been washed away by now, but their impact would lead to lasting changes in how his department operated. Outside the station, life went on. The little girl was back at school, her teachers keeping a close eye on her. The corner store remained open, now with a new sign in the window about community unity. And on the sidewalk, fresh chalk drawings had appeared, not just from one little girl, but from dozens of neighborhood children, their art a colorful testament to resilience and hope. The officer sat alone in his apartment, staring at the blank TV screen that reflected his troubled face. His service medals from Afghanistan hung on the wall, dusty reminders of another life. 3 tours of duty had left him with more than just honors. They'd left him with shadows that followed him home. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, untouched like the stack of newspapers on his coffee table, all bearing headlines about the incident. He couldn't bring himself to read them, but he couldn't throw them away either. The image of that little girl's frightened face kept flashing in his mind, mixing with other memories he'd tried so hard to forget. The department-mandated counselor sat across from him the next morning, her office warm and quiet. "Tell me about that day," she said softly. "What were you thinking when you got the call?" He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit from his military days. "I was trained to respond quickly, to take control of situations," he began. His voice was barely above a whisper. In the war zone, hesitation meant death. But this wasn't a war zone. It was just a little girl drawing butterflies. The truth emerged slowly. He'd been rushed through the police academy's 12-week program during a severe staffing shortage. The department needed officers urgently, and his military background made him seem like a perfect candidate. Nobody had stopped to ask if he needed more time to adjust to civilian life, to learn a different kind of peacekeeping. "Sometimes," he admitted to the counselor, "I still hear the explosions. I see threats in ordinary things. That day, when I got the call about a suspicious person, my mind went straight to the worst possibilities. I forgot I was on a peaceful street in my own city." His training files told their own story. Excellent marks in physical fitness and weapons handling, but notes of concern about his approach to community interactions. comments about being too rigid and overly tactical in routine situations, a recommendation for additional training that got lost in administrative paperwork. At home, his sister visited, bringing photos from their childhood. "Remember when you used to draw on the sidewalk with me?" she asked gently. "Mom kept every picture you drew." The memories hit hard. He had been that kid once, creating art with chalk, feeling safe and free. The department psychologist diagnosed him with PTSD, recommending immediate leave and intensive therapy. But something else happened too. As he began to face his own trauma, he started to understand the trauma he'd caused. The little girl's fear wasn't just about handcuffs. It was about losing her sense of safety in a place she called home. His neighbors, who used to just nod politely, started reaching out. An elderly veteran brought him dinner, sharing stories about his own struggles after Vietnam. The local coffee shop owner, whose daughter was the same age as the girl he'd arrested, invited him to talk over fresh pastries. During his therapy sessions, he began to see how his unhealed wounds had affected his judgment. The heightened alertness that had kept him alive in war was misplaced on peaceful streets. Every shadow didn't hide an enemy. Every unexpected movement wasn't a threat. He started volunteering at the local veterans center, working with other officers struggling with similar issues. His story became a powerful reminder of the importance of mental health support for law enforcement. The rush to put officers on the street, he realized, had to be balanced with proper training and healing time. One evening, he sat down to write a letter, not just to the little girl and her mother, but to his younger self, the boy who once drew on sidewalks without fear. The words came slowly at first, then poured out like a flood. He wrote about fear, about mistakes, about learning to see the world through peaceful eyes again. As the sun set outside his window, casting long shadows across his desk, he made a promise to himself. He would turn this mistake into something meaningful. The same dedication that had made him a soldier and then a police officer would now drive him to become something else, a bridge between the warriors who protected communities and the communities themselves who needed protection, understanding, and most importantly, peace. The mother looked out at a sea of faces in the community center. Police officers sat next to concerned parents, social workers beside community leaders. The room buzzed with energy, all eyes fixed on the presentation screen behind her. She gripped her laser pointer, took a deep breath, and began. "Before I was a doctor, before I owned a store, I was simply a mother," she started, her voice clear and strong. "And today, I'm here because every parent's fear became my reality." She clicked to the first slide, a child's brain scan showing the impact of trauma. In the front row, the police chief leaned forward, taking notes. Next to him, a group of training officers watched intently as she explained how fear affects a young mind. The medical data told a powerful story, but it was her personal touch that brought it home. "When my daughter has nightmares now, she doesn't dream of monsters under her bed," the mother continued. "She dreams of uniforms and handcuffs. But we can change this. We must change this." A young officer raised her hand. "How do we handle calls involving children while still doing our jobs?" The question hung in the air, heavy with importance. The mother smiled. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. She pulled up another slide, this one showing a new protocol she'd developed with child psychologists. Simple steps. Approach slowly, kneel to the child's level, ask questions before making assumptions. Basic things that could make all the difference. In the back of the room, local shop owners nodded in agreement. They'd seen too many kids stop for just being kids, playing, laughing, existing while different. The mother's presentation gave voice to their concerns while offering real solutions. The reform movement grew beyond that room. Other cities started calling, wanting to learn more. The mother found herself traveling on weekends, speaking at police academies and community forums. Her daughter's story became a catalyst for change, but it was her medical expertise that gave weight to the solutions. Back home, changes were already visible. Officers now carried special training cards with reminders about dealing with young people. The cards had a butterfly symbol on them, a quiet tribute to an unfinished sidewalk drawing that had started it all. "We need to build bridges, not barriers," the mother explained to a reporter after one session. Behind her, officers and community members practiced role-playing scenarios together, learning to see situations from different angles. The local police department became a testing ground for new ideas. They created a youth advisory board, where kids could speak directly to officers about their fears and hopes. Even her daughter, still healing but growing stronger, found her voice in these meetings. One afternoon, while setting up for another training session, the mother found an unexpected ally. The officer from the incident approached her, now part of a peer support program helping other officers process trauma. Together, they added another dimension to the training, understanding how an officer's own past experiences could cloud their judgment. The changes weren't always easy. Some resistant voices claimed the new approaches made officers too soft. But when the first year's results came in, showing a dramatic drop in confrontational incidents with minors, those voices grew quieter. Community trust began to rebuild, slowly but surely. Officers started joining neighborhood events, not to patrol, but to participate. The Mother's Corner store hosted monthly meetings where residents and police could talk openly about concerns and solutions. The butterfly drawing that never got finished that day became a symbol of transformation. Local artists painted them on walls around the city. Children drew them in chalk on sidewalks without fear. Each butterfly represented a small victory. Another officer trained, another child protected, another bridge built. As the mother wrapped up another training session, she noticed something remarkable. The questions had changed. Instead of "Why do we need this?" people were asking, "How can we do more?" The fear in the room had been replaced by hope, determination, and a shared commitment to protect childhood innocence. Outside, the sun was setting on another busy day of change. On the sidewalk, children played freely, their laughter mixing with the evening air. Among them was her daughter, chalk in hand, finally finishing that butterfly, its wings spread wide, ready to soar. The police chief stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his badge one last time. Today wasn't just another day at the department. It was the day everything would officially change. His phone buzzed with messages from other chiefs across the country, all waiting to see how this bold new program would unfold. Inside the department's main hall, the usual rows of desks had been cleared away. Instead, round tables filled the space, each one mixing officers with community members. The walls, once bare except for protocol posters, now displayed children's artwork, including a special section of butterfly drawings that started it all. "I never thought I'd see yoga mats in a police station," whispered one veteran officer to another, watching as instructors set up for the morning's mindfulness session. It was part of the new routine. Every shift started with 15 minutes of stress management and mental preparation. The morning briefing looked different too. Instead of just reviewing crime stats, officers shared stories about positive community interactions. A young patrol officer spoke about helping kids set up a lemonade stand. Another mentioned playing basketball with teenagers during his lunch break. These weren't just feel-good stories. They were part of the new measurement of success. In the training room, screens showed live feeds from body cameras, but not of arrests or confrontations. These were examples of officers doing things right, taking time with elderly residents, speaking eye to eye with children, diffusing tensions with calm words instead of force. The mother who had sparked these changes sat on the newly formed Civilian Oversight Committee, reviewing body camera footage not to find fault, but to identify moments where officers excelled at community interaction. Those moments became teaching tools, shared in training sessions across departments. "Remember," the chief addressed his officers during the afternoon roll call, "we're not just enforcing laws anymore. We're building trust, one interaction at a time." On each officer's desk lay a new handbook, not the usual rigid rulebook, but a guide to human connection, with entire sections dedicated to child psychology and cultural awareness. The changes weren't just on paper. The department's break room had been transformed into a community meeting space where officers could have coffee with residents and hear their concerns directly. Today, a group of elementary school teachers sat sharing lunch with patrol officers, discussing how to make school zones feel safer for everyone. Outside, the patrol cars looked different too. Gone were the intimidating dark tents. The windows were clear now, letting people see the human beings inside. Some cars even carried art supplies and sports equipment, tools for building relationships rather than just enforcing rules. The dispatch center had new protocols. Calls about suspicious behavior now required more detailed information before officers were sent. Dispatchers were trained to ask questions that helped distinguish between actual threats and potential bias. In the department's lobby, a new screen displayed a real-time map of positive police interactions, green dots showing where officers had helped community members, participated in neighborhood events, or resolved situations peacefully. It was a daily reminder that their success wasn't measured in arrests, but in connections. The hardest critics became the strongest supporters. Old-school officers who initially resisted the changes now led training sessions, sharing how their own approaches had evolved. "I've been on the force 30 years," one sergeant told his group, "but I'm just now learning what it truly means to protect and serve." As evening approached, the chief walked through his transformed department. He passed the new meditation room, where officers could decompress after difficult calls. He saw the community art wall, where local children's drawings hung alongside photos of officers participating in neighborhood events. The day shift was ending, and the night shift was beginning. Officers gathered in small groups, not just to discuss patrol routes, but to check in on each other's mental health and share strategies for positive community engagement. A young officer approached the chief, holding up her phone. "Look at this," she said excitedly. It was a social media post from a local parent, praising an officer for taking time to draw chalk butterflies with neighborhood kids. The chief smiled, remembering how a similar scene, handled so differently, had started this journey of change. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows through the station's newly installed windows, the chief felt a deep sense of pride. His department wasn't just enforcing the law anymore. They were building a new kind of peace, one human connection at a time. In a bright room filled with art supplies, the little girl sat at a table covered in colorful paper and markers. Her child therapist watched as she drew, noticing how the butterflies she once loved to create had slowly transformed into something new. Today, they had wings made of badges and handcuffs turned into flower petals. "Can you tell me about your drawing?" the therapist asked gently, sitting beside her. The girl didn't look up, but her hand moved steadily across the paper as she spoke. "These butterflies are special," she explained, coloring carefully within the lines. "They help scared kids feel brave again." Her voice was stronger now, different from the whispers of her first sessions months ago. At home, her mother noticed other changes too. The nightmares came less frequently. When police cars drove by their store, her daughter no longer hid behind the counter. Instead, she would wave, especially to the officers she recognized from community meetings. The art therapy sessions had become more than just healing sessions. The girls' drawings were now part of a growing collection used to train police officers. In briefing rooms across the city, her artwork hung on walls, reminding officers to see the world through a child's eyes. One afternoon, while working on a particularly detailed butterfly, she heard a familiar voice outside the therapy room. It was the officer from that day, there to speak with another group about his own journey of healing. The girl's hand paused over her drawing, but she didn't feel afraid anymore. "Would you like to show him your art?" the therapist asked carefully. The girl thought for a moment, then nodded. When the officer entered, he knelt down to her level, just as he'd learned in the new training program. "Your butterflies are beautiful," he said softly, noticing how she turned his badge into something peaceful and new. His own therapy had taught him the power of transformation, how pain could become purpose. The girl's art began appearing in unexpected places. A local gallery hosted an exhibition called Through a Child's Eyes, featuring her work alongside other young artists who'd experienced similar traumas. Police cadets were required to visit as part of their training. During one art session, she created something different, a picture of her mom speaking to a room full of police officers. "That's my superhero," she explained to her therapist. "She helps make sure other kids don't get scared like I did." The corner store became a kind of healing center too. Children would gather there after school, covering the sidewalk with chalk art, while police officers on break would stop to admire their work and sometimes join in. The girl taught them how to draw her special butterflies, each one a small step toward trust. Her school counselor noticed positive changes as well. The girl had started helping other students who felt afraid or misunderstood. During a class project about community heroes, she drew both her mother and a police officer, standing together under a sky full of butterflies. The therapy room's walls tracked her progress through art. Early drawings showed dark colors and sharp edges. But as months passed, the colors grew brighter, the lines softer. Her butterflies began to carry messages of hope. Be brave. Stay strong. Keep flying. One day, she drew something that made her therapist smile. A picture of herself, grown up, wearing both a doctor's coat like her mother's and a police badge. "I want to help people feel safe," she explained, "like how everyone helped me feel safe again." During a community art festival, the girl set up a chalk drawing station. Children and police officers took turns creating butterflies together. Her own butterfly, bigger than all the rest, spread its wings across the sidewalk, not a symbol of fear anymore, but of transformation. As the sun set that evening, casting warm light across the chalk-covered street, the girl looked at her work with pride. She had turned her scary memory into something beautiful, something that helped others. Her mother watched from the store doorway, tears in her eyes, seeing not just her daughter's healing, but the healing of an entire community, drawn in sidewalk chalk and butterfly wings. The autumn wind scattered leaves across the sidewalk as the officer walked up to the corner store. His hands weren't resting on his belt anymore, but holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. Through the window, he could see the butterfly drawings that now decorated the walls. Some were his own, drawn during the community healing sessions. Inside, the store smelled of fresh cookies and coffee. The mother looked up from the counter, giving him a gentle nod. She'd watched his transformation over the months, from the man who had handcuffed her daughter to someone who now taught other officers about compassion and understanding. "Is she here?" he asked softly. The mother pointed to the back of the store, where her daughter sat helping younger kids with their homework, something she did every Thursday afternoon now. The officer took a deep breath and walked over. "I brought something for you," he said, kneeling down to her level, a gesture that had become natural to him after months of new training. The little girl looked at him with clear eyes, no trace of the fear that had once been there. Inside the package was a book, one he had written about his journey from soldier to officer to student of peace. The first page held a dedication, "To the young artist who taught me to see butterflies instead of shadows." The mother joined them, watching as her daughter carefully opened the book. Inside were photos of police departments across the country that had adopted their city's new training program. Each page showed officers and children drawing together, playing sports, sharing stories. "I speak at police academies now," the officer explained, his voice steady but humble. "I tell them about the day I made the biggest mistake of my career, and how it led to the most important lessons I have ever learned." The girl's finger traced over a photo of cadets sitting in an art therapy session. "They're drawing butterflies," she noticed, a small smile playing on her lips. The officer nodded. Her drawings had become part of the standard training curriculum, a reminder of innocence and the importance of seeing situations through a child's eyes. Outside, a police car pulled up, but this time no one tensed. The chief stepped out, carrying a framed certificate. The store had been officially designated as a community bridge builder, a new program that recognized businesses that helped foster understanding between police and residents. The ceremony was small but meaningful, Regular customers mingled with officers, sharing stories over cups of coffee. The old barber from next door brought out photos of the sidewalk art from over the years, a timeline of healing drawn in chalk. The officer stood up to speak, his voice carrying through the quiet store. "A few months ago, I saw danger where there was only childhood joy," he admitted. "I was looking through the lens of my own trauma, my own fears. But thanks to this brave young lady and her mother, I learned to see the world differently." He turned to the girl. "Your butterflies taught me that transformation is possible, that something beautiful can come from even our darkest moments." The girl beamed, no longer the frightened child in handcuffs, but a symbol of change and resilience. The mother watched as her daughter showed the younger children how to draw butterflies on paper now displayed in the store window. Each drawing would join the others, creating a growing testament to the power of understanding and forgiveness. As evening approached, the officer helped close up the store. He paused at the door, looking back at the wall of butterfly drawings, artwork from children, officers, and community members, all blended together in a colorful display of unity. "Sometimes," he said to the mother, "it takes a child to teach us the simplest truths. That fear can become courage, that mistakes can lead to miracles, that even the smallest butterfly can create waves of change." The streetlights flickered on outside, casting a warm glow over the sidewalk where it had all begun. Tomorrow, new chalk drawings would appear, new stories would be shared, and new bridges would be built, all because one little girl had dared to keep drawing butterflies, even after the shadows had passed. 2 years had passed since that fateful day. The corner store now bustled with a different kind of energy. Children's laughter mixed with the chime of the doorbell as people streamed in for the special anniversary celebration. The walls, once plain, now told a story through hundreds of butterfly drawings, each one representing a small victory in the journey of change. The mother stood behind the counter, watching as her daughter, now 11, helped arrange cookies on display plates. The girl had grown taller, stronger, more confident. She no longer introduced herself as the girl who got arrested. Instead, she proudly called herself the girl who helped change things. Today was special. News crews set up their cameras outside as police cars lined the street, not for enforcement, but for celebration. Officers in uniform mingled with families, sharing stories and snacks. Some wore special pins featuring a butterfly design, marking them as graduates of the new community engagement program. "Look, Mom," her daughter called out, pointing to a tablet showing live video from another city. Similar celebrations were happening across the country. Their small corner store had sparked a movement that spread like wildfire, touching communities they'd never even visited. The foundation they'd started, Butterflies for Change, had trained over 5,000 officers nationwide. Its simple message resonated everywhere. See the person before the situation. Understand before acting. Build bridges instead of walls. Inside the store, a new installation caught everyone's eye. A wall-sized monitor displayed a map dotted with bright points of light, each one representing a police department that had adopted their training program. The lights spread like a constellation across the country, from big cities to small towns. The officer who had changed their lives arrived with his own contribution, a leather-bound book filled with letters from other officers whose perspectives had shifted after going through the program. "Your story helped me remember why I became an officer," one wrote. "To protect innocence, not destroy it." Children from the neighborhood had organized their own presentation. They performed a play about the incident, but with a twist, showing how things should have happened, how they happen now. The audience watched with tears and smiles as the story of fear transformed into one of understanding. A group of teenagers, inspired by the changes they'd witnessed, presented their new app, a platform where young people could share their positive interactions with police officers. The mother watched proudly as her daughter demonstrated it, showing how each shared story added another butterfly to the virtual sky. The old-timers of the neighborhood sat in their special corner, nodding with satisfaction. They remembered the tensions of the past and marveled at the change. The store that had been just a simple family business had become a symbol of hope, a blueprint for community transformation. During the ceremony, the mayor announced a new city initiative named after their movement. Every police academy graduate would now spend their first week working with children through art and play, learning to see the community through young eyes before ever putting on a badge. As evening approached, everyone gathered outside for the grand final. Hundreds of pieces of chalk were handed out to officers, children, parents, and community members. Together, they covered the sidewalk with butterflies of all sizes and colors, each one representing a dream of continued change. The mother watched as her daughter taught a group of new police cadets how to draw her special butterflies. "Remember," she heard her say, "every butterfly needs both wings to fly. Just like every community needs both protection and understanding to thrive." The sun began to set, casting long shadows that danced among the chalk drawings. But unlike that day 2 years ago, these shadows held no fear. They were just part of the picture, making the bright colors seem even brighter. As the celebration wound down, the mother and daughter stood in their doorway, arms around each other, looking at their transformed world. The store lights illuminated the sidewalk art, creating a glowing path of butterflies that seemed to stretch endlessly into the future. "Mom," the girl said softly, "do you think we really changed things?" The mother smiled, watching an officer and a child add one last butterfly to the day's artwork. "We did more than change things, sweetheart. We showed people how to see the butterflies in each other."